you walk down the street, smiling everyone you meet, rich or poor, young or old.
Everybody knew everybody. This is what it was. If you live next door to me, I know you.
I mean, you could walk from one house without a smell food. Come on in here, y'all want something to eat. This is how we were. We could go in the house and eat.
We had right on the corner where you see that sign right there, we had a store there. They sell all kinds of things. What called was fish buying store.
You know, it was markets, it was stores, you know, lunchrooms and so forth.
Some of them worked at Domino Sugar. Some of them worked Spurs Point.
So we had a little dance hall. The lady's name was Susan May Terry. She had a dance place, and we lived on the second floor.
We would go in there and didn't have enough money for our medicine. And it was okay with him. We could get our medicine. He knew us.
And it was, you know, it was nice during that time because I loved everybody.
When you work and play and sing, you be proud.
This community is called Sharp-Leadenhall, but it hasn't always been called that, and it hasn't always been confined to just a few small blocks of South Baltimore. Sharp-Leadenhall is what remains of the first African-American neighborhood in Baltimore, founded by freed slaves just a few blocks north of here in 1790. By 1832, it had become a center of black culture. Frederick Douglass was a member of the neighborhood's Sharp Street AME Church. After the Civil War, the community expanded south from Pratt Street, wedging some 4,200 mostly black residents between the B&O railroad yards and the harbor. Known by residents simply as South Baltimore, it remained a poor but stable community of workers and their families until the 1930s, when the city rezoned it to permit nearly unrestricted commercial and industrial use alongside residential properties. Hilda Singleton grew up in South Baltimore during that period.
And also somewhere around here, they would have a place called a bathhouse, and you could go take a bath. It was like that. That's how it was down here. You pay a little something to get a bath. You didn't have to go dirty.
My mother and them rented a room. You know, this was like a rooming house. And we slept in one room where she had 3 beds in there. My mother and my father. I had a bed by myself, but I was the oldest girl. So that means my brothers, my 3 brothers, they had a bed. So they slept in that bed.
Neglected by a city preoccupied with expanding to the north and west, services in South Baltimore remained rudimentary for decades.
This was during the 50s. They had the outhouses in the back. It was wooden outhouses. Although they had running water, they had toilets inside, you know, and it was most of the yards was dirt. It was very little pavements, you know, on the streets.
So dirt?
Yeah,
dirt roads.
You had a lot of dirt roads.
We didn't have no whole lot of help down here. And if we had voting people, we didn't know nothing about them because they was in their own districts down here. We didn't have anybody around exactly in here. They were all down like the 4th Avenue area if we had anybody. They were down in that area, the councilman or whoever was, and they never bothered about nothing up here.
By the late 1960s, city, state, and federal officials decided to do away with the neighborhood altogether. It would be bulldozed to make room for the new highway, Interstate 95.
The thing that seemed most positive was to run the big highway through here, the interstate. Run it right through the middle of Sharp-Leadenhall, run it up across what is now Montgomery Street, up over the top of Federal Hill, across the harbor, down into Fells Point.
The city came in, you know, and bought out. So that's how we ended up moving.
We had to move out because the city bought the houses. They bought the house, the city. We got the letter saying the city bought your house, and you will have to move. We will pay you to move. They tell you such and such a time when the meeting going to be.
Then they said the highway's coming through and you gotta move. I said, oh God.
The city bought houses in the neighborhood, evicted longtime renters, and created a swath of vacant homes through the middle of the neighborhood that was 2 blocks wide and at least 14 blocks long. The whole neighborhood would have been destroyed by community activists who were able to get the path of the highway moved.
Ultimately, because of community pressure, I mean collective community pressure, the route of that road was changed. But the damage had been done. because properties had been acquired. People were moved out of those homes that they had lived in.
When the dust settled around 1978, the neighborhood still stood, but barely. 360 houses had been razed. 3,000 residents had been displaced. Only 500 holdouts remained in the wreckage of Baltimore's oldest African-American community. The city leaders who had helped create this virtual wasteland then designated it an urban renewal area. They cut the remains of Black South Baltimore in two, calling the northern section Inner Harbor West and the southern section Sharp-Leadenhall. The city acquired any remaining private property in Inner Harbor West and then sold it cheaply to developers and individual homeowners who pledged to invest thousands of dollars to rebuild the area. The poor black families renting in Inner Harbor West were forced out, many of them veterans of the highway displacement just a few years before.
The highway was coming, through, and you had to move, and then they built the houses up. But then everybody got in the houses with rich folks or white folks. You couldn't go back to stay. That's what I didn't like. I didn't like that.
And after they bought the houses, they fixed them up like a mansion. Beautiful houses.
Like Lee Street. They built Lee Street all up, and I moved from there. When you go down there and look at it, now you wouldn't even believe that.
And the rent was so high, they know we couldn't afford it. So that's that. They took our houses away.
Inner Harbor West became Otterbein, an upper-middle-class enclave that is 75% white.
I remember the time we couldn't walk down this way after they had got it, They didn't want you in the neighborhood, to tell the truth about it. So, we come through here, they would, we had a lady that lived in Bibben Street, and she come through here, they sick the dog on you if you walk down this way.
Excluded from Otterbein, neighbors set about improving what was left to them. 10 years' worth of community pressure finally convinced officials to follow through on a promise to provide 190 subsidized and 25 public housing units in Sharp-Leadenhall. In the 1990s, residents started owning their own property.
Part of the city's promise to this community was the building of some affordable home ownership housing. We had to mount a campaign to press the city to come forward with this money that had promised for probably 15 or 20 years. And we persuaded the city to keep its promise. So this enabled low and moderate income families to purchase these homes. They got a really good deal.
Linda Davis bought one of the houses.
I'm going to be here permanently. And when I rented, I didn't know where I would end up. So now I know that I have a permanent place. So it is a different feeling. It really is. It's a feeling of belonging. I always felt like I belonged to the neighborhood. My grandmother was born in 1889, and her grandmother raised her down here. And I lived in 106 Cross Street, and now I live 130. And now I'm back in the same neighborhood that I was born in. It feels good.
Today, neighbors continue to improve Sharp-Leadenhall through a planning committee that runs a youth rec league, beautifies streets, organizes resident advocacy groups, and holds politicians to promises they've made. A key concern right now of the committee is the city's management of public housing. Baltimore's mayor responded to the committee's request for improvements.
There are in Sharp-Leadenhall 25 units of public housing that, as I was walking around, seemed to be the worst maintained house in the neighborhood. So we're looking for somebody to come in privately, under contract with the city, to renovate them all, and privately to manage them all, so that they can be managed properly, so that they can be maintained, so that we can get the right amount of maintenance to happen there when we need it to happen.
One resident,